The gunshot echoed through the dusty Wyoming plains like a clap of thunder, sending a flock of startled crows into the evening sky. Matilda Bennett's scream pierced the air as she clutched her swollen belly. Her wagon overturned beside her on the lonely trail to Cottonwood Springs. The year was 1877, and in that moment, as blood seeped from her driver's lifeless body, Matilda believed she would die alone in this untamed wilderness, her unborn child never knowing a single breath of life. "Help!" she cried out, her voice swallowed by the vastness of the frontier. The distant thunder of hoofbeats seemed like a hallucination until they grew louder, and a figure on horseback peered against the setting sun. Isaac Garland pulled hard on his reins, dirt kicking up beneath his stallion's hooves as he spotted the overturned wagon. His broad shoulders tensed at the sight of the pregnant woman huddled against a wheel, face contorted in terror. "Madam," he called, dismounting with the practiced ease of a man who'd spent most of his 28 years in the saddle. He approached slowly, his weathered Stetson in hand, revealing sun-streaked brown hair. "You're hurt. They took everything," Matilda sobbed, her chestnut hair falling loose from its pins, hazel eyes wide with panic. "They shot Mr. Peterson. I think my baby's coming." Another contraction seized her, and she cried out in fear, her knuckles white as she gripped the splintered wagon wheel. Isaac knelt beside her, gently taking her trembling hand in his calloused one. "You'll never face this alone," he said, his voice steady despite the gravity of their situation. "I give you my word." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Isaac knew the nearest town was still 15 miles away. He assessed their predicament with the cool pragmatism of a man who'd survived the unforgiving West by making quick decisions. "We need to make camp. I'll keep you safe tonight, and at first light, we'll get you to a doctor." "The baby won't wait until morning," Matilda whispered, her face pale in the fading light. Isaac's expression remained composed, though inside his heart raced. He delivered foals and calves on his father's ranch, but never a human child. "Then we'll welcome your little one right here under God's sky," he said with more confidence than he felt. He worked quickly, retrieving supplies from his saddlebags and building a small fire. With gentle strength, he helped Matilda away from the overturned wagon and onto a blanket spread near the warmth of the flames. He retrieved a canteen and held it to her lips. "My name is Isaac Garland," he said as she drank. "I ranch about 10 miles north of here." "Matilda Bennett," she replied between labored breaths. "My husband died of fever 6 months ago in Illinois. I was traveling to my cousin in Cottonwood Springs." Isaac nodded, understanding filling his eyes. A widow with child, braving the dangerous journey west alone. Such was the courage of women on the frontier. "You're a brave one, Mrs. Bennett." "Matilda, please," she said, grimacing as another contraction took hold. "And I don't feel brave at all." Isaac moved with purposeful efficiency, finding a second blanket in the wreckage of the wagon. He spread it near the fire and helped Matilda settle more comfortably. "My mother delivered half the babies in our county back in Missouri," he explained, rolling up his sleeves. "I watched her work more times than I can count. It was only a partial truth." He'd observed from a distance, never directly involved, but Matilda didn't need to know that now. What she needed was confidence and calm. As the night deepened, Matilda's labor intensified. Isaac maintained a reassuring presence, offering water, wiping her brow with a dampened kerchief, and speaking in low, steady tones about nothing in particular, just words to anchor her against the pain. "Why would you stop for a stranger?" Matilda asked during a brief respite between contractions. Most men would have ridden on. Isaac's expression softened in the firelight. "My pa taught me we don't measure a man by how he treats his equals, but by how he treats those in need." He paused, memories flickering behind his eyes. Besides, I know something about being alone when trouble finds you. Before Matilda could inquire further, another contraction seized her, more powerful than the last. Isaac took her hand again, his strength steady and unwavering as she crushed his fingers. "It's time," she gasped, fear and determination mingling in her voice. The night wore on, a dance of shadows and firelight as Isaac guided Matilda through the ancient ritual of childbirth. He spoke words of encouragement, prayed silently when complications seemed imminent, and marveled at the strength of this woman he'd known for mere hours. Just before dawn, as the eastern sky lightened to a pale gray, a new sound joined the crackling fire, and Matilda's exhausted breathing the lusty cry of a newborn baby girl. "You have a daughter," Isaac announced, his voice thick with emotion as he wrapped the infant in a clean shirt from his saddlebag. He placed the tiny bundle in Matilda's eager arms, watching as mother and child beheld each other for the first time. "Hello, Elizabeth," Matilda whispered, tears streaming down her face as she counted perfect fingers and toes. "After my mother." Isaac turned away, giving her a moment of privacy while he tended the fire. When he returned, Matilda was gazing at him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. "Mr. Garland, Isaac," he corrected gently. "Isaac," she amended, her voice soft with exhaustion and wonder. "I owe you my life and my daughter's. I don't know how I'll ever repay such a debt." He shook his head, settling beside her with a cup of coffee he'd brewed. "There's no debt between neighbors, Matilda. Though we've only just met out here, that's what we are." As the sun rose fully over the Wyoming territory, Isaac knew they couldn't linger. The men who had attacked the wagon might return, and Matilda needed proper care. With careful deliberation, he fashioned a travois from the wagon's remains, securing it to his horse. "We'll ride double," he explained, helping Matilda and little Elizabeth onto his stallion before mounting behind them. "It's only a few hours to Cottonwood Springs this way." Matilda leaned back against his chest, the baby secure in her arms, and for the first time in months, she felt safe. The steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the solid presence of the cowboy behind her lulled Elizabeth to sleep, and Matilda found herself drifting as well, despite the discomfort of her situation. "Rest," Isaac murmured, his breath warm against her hair. "I've got you both." They arrived in Cottonwood Springs by midday, causing quite a stir as they rode down the main street, a blood-spattered woman cradling a newborn, supported by a grim-faced cowboy. Isaac headed directly for the doctor's residence, calling out as they approached, "Doctor." Samuel Morgan, a white-haired man with kind eyes and a perpetual frown, emerged from his office wiping his hands on a towel. "What in tarnation?" "Woman gave birth on the trail," Isaac explained tersely as he dismounted. "Bandits attacked her wagon yesterday evening, killed her driver." The doctor's practiced eye took in Matilda's exhausted state and the newborn. "Bring her inside, quickly." Matilda found herself transferred from horseback to a clean bed with dizzying speed. A matronly woman appeared, the doctor's wife, she presumed, and began fussing over Elizabeth while Dr. Morgan examined Matilda. "You delivered this baby?" the doctor asked Isaac, who stood awkwardly by the door, hat in hand. "Had no choice, sir." "You did well," Dr. Morgan said after examining both mother and child. "Very well indeed. They're both healthy, considering the circumstances." Isaac nodded, relieved. Mrs. Bennett was heading to her cousin's place. "Name's Elena Wilson," Matilda supplied weakly from the bed. "She lives on Cedar Street." "I know Elena," Mrs. Morgan said. "I'll send word right away." Isaac shifted his weight, suddenly aware of the blood and dirt on his clothing, the stubble on his jaw. He'd done what was needed. Now Matilda was in proper hands, her family soon to be notified. His role in this drama was complete. "I should be going," he said, settling his hat back on his head. "I'll report the attack to Sheriff Davis on my way out of town." Matilda's eyes found his across the room. "Isaac," he tipped his hat, a small smile touching his lips. "Take care of yourself and that little one, Mrs. Bennett." Before she could respond, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Matilda stared at the space he'd occupied, a strange emptiness settling in her chest despite the precious weight of Elizabeth in her arms. She'd likely never see Isaac Garland again, and the thought brought an unexpected pang of loss. Within the hour, Elena Wilson burst into the doctor's house, her face alight with worry and joy. "Matilda! Oh, my dear girl!" She embraced her cousin carefully, mindful of the baby. "When Mrs. Morgan told me what happened, I can't believe you traveled in your condition. And bandits. And a stranger helping with the birth." The flood of questions and exclamations washed over Matilda as she tried to explain the events of the past 24 hours. Yes, the journey had been difficult. Yes, she'd been terrified. Yes, Isaac Garland had been her salvation. "Where is this cowboy hero?" Elena asked, looking around as if expecting him to materialize. "Gone," Matilda said simply, a shadow crossing her face. "He reported the attack to the sheriff and left." Elena studied her cousin's expression with shrewd eyes. At 42, she'd seen enough of life to recognize certain truths. "Well, you and little Elizabeth will stay with me and Frank, of course. Our home is yours for as long as you need." The following days passed in a blur of adjustment and recovery. Elizabeth proved to be a strong, healthy baby with a lusty cry and her mother's hazel eyes. Elena's home, a modest but comfortable house on the edge of town, became Matilda's sanctuary as she regained her strength and contemplated her future. Frank Wilson, Elena's husband and the town's blacksmith, welcomed Matilda with gruff kindness. "Any family of Elena's is family of mine," he declared, promptly building a cradle for Elizabeth from scraps of fine hardwood. A week after her dramatic arrival in Cottonwood Springs, Matilda sat on Elena's porch, rocking Elizabeth and watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange and gold. Her thoughts, as they often did in quiet moments, drifted to Isaac Garland. "Penny for your thoughts," Elena said, settling into the adjacent chair with a cup of tea. Matilda smiled faintly. "I was just wondering about Mr. Garland. He saved our lives and disappeared so quickly. Sheriff Davis mentioned he ranches north of here. The Flying G, they call it. Started it with his brother about 3 years ago after serving in the war." "The war?" Matilda looked up, surprised. Elena nodded. "The war between the states. He was just a boy when he enlisted, from what I hear. His brother Caleb was wounded badly near the end. They came west afterward, like so many did, looking for a fresh start." Matilda absorbed this information, adding these new details to the image of Isaac she carried in her mind: his steady hands, his calming voice, the shadows that sometimes crossed his expression when he thought she wasn't looking. "Frank says they've built a decent operation," Elena continued. "Nothing extravagant, but honest work with a good reputation. Isaac drives cattle to the railhead twice a year and keeps to himself otherwise." "He mentioned watching his mother deliver babies in Missouri," Matilda said softly. "He knew exactly what to do when Elizabeth was coming." Elena raised an eyebrow but said nothing, sipping her tea as twilight settled over the town. The next day brought an unexpected visitor. Sheriff Davis, a barrel-chested man with a silver mustache, knocked on Elena's door just after breakfast. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, removing his hat as Elena ushered him into the parlor. "I'm glad to see you recovering well. I wanted to inform you that we found your wagon driver's body and gave him a proper burial in the town cemetery. "Thank you, Sheriff," Matilda said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "Mr. Peterson was a kind man who agreed to drive me here as a favor to my late husband's business partner." "We're still searching for the men who attacked you," the sheriff continued. "Mr. Garland provided a decent description, but these vermin move between territories to avoid the law." Matilda nodded, expecting that would be the end of it, but the sheriff shifted, seemingly uncomfortable. "There's something else, madam. We recovered some of your belongings." He produced a small bundle wrapped in canvas. "Not much, I'm afraid. The bandits took anything of obvious value." Matilda accepted the package with trembling hands. Inside, she found a few articles of clothing, a tarnished silver hairbrush that had belonged to her mother, and most precious of all, the small leather-bound Bible her husband had given her on their wedding day. "Oh," she breathed, clutching the Bible to her chest. "Sheriff, thank you." "I thought everything was lost." Davis shook his head. "Don't thank me, madam. It was Garland who went back, tracked those bandits for 2 days, recovered what he could, and brought it to me yesterday." Matilda's heart stuttered. "He went after armed bandits, alone." "That's the kind of man Isaac Garland is," Sheriff Davis said simply. "Now, I'll leave you ladies to your day. Mrs. Bennett, when you're feeling stronger, I'll need a formal statement about the attack." After the sheriff departed, Matilda sat motionless, the Bible in her lap, her mind whirling. Isaac had risked his life to recover her meager possessions. He'd tracked dangerous men across the wilderness, confronted them somehow, and retrieved these small treasures, and hadn't even bothered to tell her himself. "You should thank him," Elena said softly, breaking into her thoughts. Matilda looked up, startled. "What? Isaac Garland. You should thank him personally." Elena's eyes held a knowing gleam. "Frank could drive you out to the Flying G next week when you're stronger." The thought sent a flutter of nervousness through Matilda's stomach. "I wouldn't want to impose." Elena laughed lightly. "Child, that man delivered your baby and tracked down outlaws to retrieve your hairbrush. I think he's past worrying about impositions." A week later, Matilda found herself seated beside Frank Wilson in his wagon, Elizabeth bundled securely in her arms, as they traveled the winding trail north of Cottonwood Springs. The early June day was pleasantly warm, wildflowers dotting the prairie in splashes of color. "Never been out to the Flying G myself," Frank commented as they crested a rise. "Heard they built it smart, though, near that stand of cottonwoods by the creek." Matilda nodded absently, her attention focused on calming her inexplicable nerves. Why should she feel anxious about seeing Isaac again? She was simply expressing gratitude to a man who had shown her extraordinary kindness. Nothing more. The ranch appeared in the distance, a modest main house with a broad porch, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals containing horses and cattle. As they approached, a tall figure emerged from the barn, shading his eyes against the sun. Even at a distance, Matilda recognized Isaac's distinctive posture. He stood watching their approach, then raised a hand in greeting when he apparently recognized Frank's wagon. "Visitors from town, Garland," Frank called as they pulled up to the hitching post. Isaac's gaze moved from Frank to Matilda, and something flickered in his expression: surprise, certainly, but something else too, something that made Matilda's breath catch. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, approaching the wagon, "this is unexpected." She found herself momentarily speechless, taking in the sight of him in the daylight. Without the crisis of her labor or the dimness of firelight, she could fully appreciate his features, the strong line of his jaw now clean-shaven, his clear blue eyes crinkled at the corners from years in the sun, the way his dark brown hair curled slightly at his collar. "Mr. Garland," she finally managed, "I hope we're not intruding." "Not at all," he replied, offering his hand to help her down from the wagon. His touch was warm and sure, just as she remembered. "How is the little one?" "Thriving," Matilda said, shifting Elizabeth so he could see her. "Thanks to you." A rare, full smile transformed Isaac's face as he looked at the baby. "She's beautiful, madam. Got your eyes, I see." The simple observation, delivered with such genuine warmth, touched Matilda deeply. "Sheriff Davis told me what you did," she said quietly. "Going after those men to retrieve my belongings." Isaac's smile faded, replaced by a hint of discomfort. "Wasn't much. It was everything to me," she insisted. "My Bible, my mother's brush, these things can't be replaced. You risked your life for trinkets that mean nothing to anyone but me." He shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Would have done the same for anyone." Frank cleared his throat. "Think I'll water the horses," he said tactfully, leading the team toward the water trough. Left alone with Isaac, as alone as one could be with a baby in arms, Matilda found herself uncharacteristically flustered. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said, "for everything." Isaac studied her for a long moment, his expression softening. "You're looking well," he said finally. "Motherhood suits you." The simple compliment brought warmth to her cheeks. "Elena has been a godsend. I don't know what I would have done without her." "You'd have managed," Isaac said with quiet conviction. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Matilda Bennett." The use of her first name sent an unexpected thrill through her. "Perhaps," she conceded, "but I'm grateful I haven't had to test that strength further." She hesitated, then added, "Would you like to hold her? Elizabeth, I mean." Something like wonder crossed Isaac's face. "I'd be honored." With careful movements, Matilda transferred the baby into his arms. Isaac cradled Elizabeth with surprising gentleness for a man of his size and strength, his expression softening as he looked down at her tiny face. "Hello again, little one," he murmured. "You've grown since last I saw you." The sight of this rugged cowboy holding her daughter with such tenderness stirred something profound in Matilda's heart. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to imagine a different life, one where Elizabeth had a father, where Matilda herself had a partner to share the burdens and joys of parenthood. The sound of approaching hoofbeats shattered the moment. A rider approached from the northern pasture, and Isaac looked up, reluctantly returning Elizabeth to her mother's arms. "My brother," he explained as the rider drew closer. Caleb Garland proved to be similar to Isaac in build, but with lighter hair and a pronounced limp when he dismounted. His handshake was firm, his manner friendly if somewhat reserved. "So you're the lady Isaac's been fretting about," he said with a mischievous glance at his brother. "He came back from town that day looking like he'd seen a ghost." "Caleb," Isaac warned, but his brother merely grinned. "Been wondering if we'd ever meet you," Caleb continued, ignoring Isaac's discomfort. "Figured Isaac would have checked on you by now, but he's stubborn about some things." Matilda glanced at Isaac, whose ears had reddened slightly. "I didn't want to intrude," he muttered. Frank returned from watering the horses, and the conversation shifted to ranch matters and town news. Matilda found herself observing the interactions between the brothers, the easy camaraderie, the shared understanding, the way they communicated sometimes with just a look. "You should stay for dinner," Caleb announced suddenly. "Our cook makes a fine stew, and it's not often we have guests." Frank begged off, citing the need to return to his forge, but after a moment's hesitation, Matilda accepted. "If it's truly no imposition, I'd be glad to stay." "I'll drive Mrs. Bennett back to town afterward," Isaac added quickly. "No need for you to return, Frank," and so it was arranged. Frank departed with assurances to Elena that Matilda was in good hands, and Matilda found herself ushered into the Garland brothers' home, a surprisingly comfortable dwelling with solid furniture, clean floors, and even a few books on shelves near the fireplace. "It's not fancy," Isaac said, watching her take in their home, "but it serves us well enough." "It's lovely," she replied honestly. "You've made a real home here." The ranch's cook, an older Mexican man named Miguel who greeted Matilda with courtly manners, served a hearty stew with fresh, baked bread. The meal was simple but delicious, and the conversation flowed more easily than Matilda had expected. Caleb proved to be a natural storyteller, regaling her with tales of their early days on the ranch, the harsh first winter, the spring flood that nearly washed away their initial structures, the time Isaac had to deliver a breech calf during a blizzard. "He's always had a way with birthing," Caleb said with a meaningful glance at Elizabeth, who was sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle fashioned from a drawer lined with blankets. "Our ma was a midwife back in Missouri. Isaac was her assistant from the time he was knee-high." Matilda looked at Isaac with new understanding. "You said you'd watched her work." He shrugged, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "Didn't want to make a fuss about it." "My brother," Caleb said fondly, "has never been one to boast about his capabilities." He raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. "To Isaac, who does what needs doing without complaint." After dinner, Caleb excused himself, claiming paperwork in need of attention, though his wink to Matilda suggested other motives. Isaac invited her to sit on the porch, where the evening breeze carried the scent of sage and distant rain. "Your brother is quite charming," Matilda observed as they settled into rocking chairs, Elizabeth sleeping against her shoulder. Isaac chuckled. "Caleb got all the charm in the family, I'm afraid. I got the—" He trailed off, seemingly searching for the word. "Steadiness," Matilda supplied. "The dependability." He glanced at her, something warm in his gaze. "Most would call it dullness." "Most would be wrong," she replied softly. "There's nothing dull about a man who keeps his word, who helps without being asked, who delivers babies and tracks outlaws and builds a home from wilderness." The silence that followed was comfortable, filled with the sounds of the ranch settling for the evening, distant lowing of cattle, the occasional whinny from the corral, the creak of the rocking chairs on the wooden porch. "What will you do now?" Isaac asked finally. "Will you stay in Cottonwood Springs?" Matilda sighed, the question bringing her back to practical concerns. "For a while, yes. Elena and Frank have been so generous, but I can't impose indefinitely. I need to find work, a place of my own." "What skills do you have?" "I was a school teacher before I married," she replied. "And I sew reasonably well. I'm a quick learner with figures, too. I kept the books for my husband's mercantile." Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "Cottonwood Springs has been talking about starting a proper school. The minister's wife teaches the children now, but there are more families arriving every month." Hope flickered in Matilda's chest. "A teaching position would be ideal." "I'll speak with Mayor Thornton when I'm next in town," Isaac offered. "He's mentioned the school matter to me before." "That's very kind," Matilda said, touched by his continued willingness to help her. "But I've imposed on your generosity quite enough." Isaac turned to face her directly, his expression serious. "Matilda, helping you has never been an imposition. It's been—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "It's been a privilege." The simple sincerity in his voice moved her deeply. "Isaac, you don't owe me anything," he continued quickly. "I want to be clear about that, but I'd like to think we could be friends at least. Friends." The word settled between them, neither entirely sufficient nor entirely wrong. "I'd like that very much," Matilda said finally. The ride back to Cottonwood Springs in Isaac's buggy was filled with comfortable conversation and comfortable silences. Elizabeth slept peacefully, bundled against the evening chill as Isaac pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area. "That ridge there," he said, gesturing to a formation silhouetted against the darkening sky, "is where the Arapaho would watch for buffalo herds according to old Miguel. He's lived in these parts for 40 years. It's beautiful country, Matilda observed, taking in the vast openness, so different from the wooded hills of Illinois. Harsh but beautiful. Like most worthwhile things, Isaac agreed, his gaze lingering on her profile for a moment. At Elena's house, he insisted on seeing her to the door. "Thank you for coming today," he said as they stood on the porch, Elizabeth still sleeping in Matilda's arms. "It meant a great deal. To me as well," she replied softly. "Good night, Isaac." "Good night, Matilda." He tipped his hat and turned to go, then paused. "I'll be in town on Saturday for supplies. Perhaps I could call on you then." The question, casual yet significant, hung in the air between them. "I'd like that," Matilda said, her heart beating a little faster than it should. With a nod and a smile, Isaac departed, leaving Matilda to face Elena's knowing expression as she entered the house. "Don't start," Matilda warned her cousin good-naturedly. Elena raised her hands in mock surrender. "I didn't say a word." True to his word, Isaac appeared at Elena's door the following Saturday, hat in hand and freshly shaven. He brought a small wooden rattle for Elizabeth, carved by his own hand during evening hours, and news that Mayor Thornton was indeed interested in discussing a teaching position with Matilda. "He asks if you might meet with the town council next Friday," Isaac said as they walked along Cottonwood Springs Main Street, Elizabeth secured in a sling across Matilda's chest. "They've been saving funds for a schoolhouse, but with winter coming, they're thinking of starting lessons in the church until spring." Matilda's step lightened at the prospect. "That would be perfect. I could start setting up a curriculum immediately." Isaac smiled at her enthusiasm. "I told the mayor you'd be eager." He seemed pleased, said his boy can barely write his name, and he's already 12. Their walk took them past the Mercantile, where Isaac insisted on buying candy sticks for them both, a small luxury. He called it, and to the edge of town, where a half-built structure marked the future location of the schoolhouse. "It's not much yet," Isaac observed as they stood looking at the foundation and partial framing. "But the town's growing. They'll finish it come spring." Matilda tried to envision it complete a proper schoolroom with desks and books, children's voices filling the space with questions and answers. "It will be wonderful," she said, meaning it. As they turned back toward town, their hands brushed accidentally, sending an unexpected jolt of awareness through Matilda. Isaac's fingers twitched, as if he might take her hand, but the moment passed, and they continued walking with a careful few inches between them. The following weeks established a pattern. Isaac would come to town on Saturdays, ostensibly for supplies, and spend an hour or two in Matilda's company. Sometimes they walked. Sometimes they sat on Elena's porch. Sometimes they visited the Mercantile or attended church socials together. Matilda's meeting with the town council resulted in her immediate hiring as Cottonwood Springs' first official schoolteacher. Classes would begin in September, held temporarily in the church until the schoolhouse was completed. "You'll be a wonderful teacher," Isaac told her when she shared the news, his pride in her accomplishment evident in his voice. "Those children are fortunate." "I'm the fortunate one," she replied. "To have found a place here, a purpose." July brought scorching heat and infrequent but violent thunderstorms. Isaac's visits became less regular as ranch work demanded more of his time. Cattle to move to higher pastures, hay to cut and store, repairs to make before winter's arrival. "Ranching's a jealous mistress," he explained apologetically when 2 weeks passed without a visit. "Especially with just Caleb, Miguel, and me handling most of it." "You should hire help," Matilda suggested as they shared lemonade on Elena's porch, watching Elizabeth attempt to roll over on a blanket at their feet. Isaac nodded thoughtfully. We've been considering it. The herd's growing, and Caleb's leg troubles him more than he admits. He glanced at her, a hint of vulnerability in his expression. Truth is, I've missed our visits. The simple admission warmed Matilda more than the summer sun. As have I, she confessed. August brought the county fair to Cottonwood Springs, a 3-day celebration of community and harvest that drew ranchers and farmers from miles around. Elena insisted Matilda needed a new dress for the occasion, and despite her protests about unnecessary expense, Matilda found herself the owner of a lovely blue calico that complimented her eyes. Isaac Garland won't know what hit him, Elena declared as she helped Matilda with her hair the morning of the fair's opening. Elena, it's not like that, Matilda protested, though her heightened color suggested otherwise. Her cousin merely smiled knowingly. Of course not, dear. The fairgrounds buzzed with activity, livestock judging, preserves competitions, horse races, and food stalls filling the air with tantalizing aromas. Matilda, with Elizabeth secured in her new baby sling, wandered through the exhibits with Frank and Elena, greeting neighbors and admiring handiwork. She spotted Isaac before he saw her tall and straight-backed among a group of ranchers, his Sunday shirt straining slightly across his shoulders as he laughed at something Caleb said. The sight of him, relaxed and smiling, created a flutter in her chest that she could no longer pretend was merely gratitude. When he finally turned and saw her, his smile widened, and he excused himself from his companions to make his way toward her. "You look beautiful," he said without preamble, his gaze taking in her new dress and carefully arranged hair. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy under his appreciative gaze. "It's Elena's doing, mostly." "Then I'm in Elena's debt," he said with a grin, before crouching to address Elizabeth, who gurgled happily at the sight of him. "And how's my favorite young lady today? Growing like a weed, I see." The possessive "my" wasn't lost on Matilda, nor on Elena, who exchanged a meaningful glance with Frank before announcing they were going to visit the preserve judging tent. "We'll find you later," Elena called over her shoulder, leaving Matilda alone with Isaac before she could protest. "Would you like to walk with me?" Isaac asked, offering his arm in a gentlemanly gesture. Matilda hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in the crook of his elbow. "I'd be delighted." They strolled through the fairgrounds, stopping occasionally to greet acquaintances or admire exhibits. Isaac bought her a piece of cherry pie from the church lady's booth, insisting she try it while he held Elizabeth. "You're getting quite comfortable with her," Matilda observed as Isaac expertly adjusted the baby in his arms. He smiled down at Elizabeth, who had wrapped her tiny hand around his finger. "She makes it easy, sweet-tempered, just like her mother." The compliment brought color to Matilda's cheeks. "I don't know about that. I can be quite stubborn when the situation warrants." "Another quality I admire," Isaac replied, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. The moment was interrupted by the announcement of the afternoon horse races. Isaac's expression brightened. "Caleb's entered our new stallion. Would you like to watch?" They found places along the rail, Matilda reclaiming Elizabeth as they waited for the races to begin. The excitement of the crowd was infectious, and when Caleb rode past on a magnificent chestnut stallion, Isaac cheered loudly. "That's Thunder," he explained to Matilda. "Best piece of horseflesh we've ever owned. Cost us nearly a year's profits, but he'll sire a line that'll make the Flying G known throughout the territory." His enthusiasm was endearing, and Matilda found herself cheering just as loudly when the race began. Thunder lived up to his name, thundering down the track with powerful strides that left the competition behind. "He did it!" Isaac exclaimed as Thunder crossed the finish line 3 lengths ahead of the nearest competitor. In his excitement, he swept Matilda into a one-armed embrace, careful of Elizabeth between them. The spontaneous gesture lasted only seconds, but when they separated, something had shifted between them. Isaac's eyes held a question, and Matilda's answered with a softness that needed no words. The rest of the afternoon passed in a pleasant blur of activities and conversations, the two of them moving through the fair as naturally as if they'd been keeping company for years, rather than months. As evening approached, musicians began setting up in the cleared area near the dance platform. "They'll be starting the dancing soon," Isaac observed, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "I'm not much of a dancer, but I'd love to," Matilda replied before he could finish, surprising herself with her boldness. His smile was worth any impropriety. "I'll step on your toes," he warned. "I'll forgive you," she assured him. Elena appeared as if summoned by the prospect of romance, offering to take Elizabeth back to the house. "Frank and I are tired," she declared unconvincingly. "We'll put the little one to bed. You young people enjoy yourselves." Before Matilda could protest, Elena had whisked Elizabeth away, leaving her and Isaac alone as the first strains of a waltz filled the evening air. "Shall we?" Isaac asked, offering his hand. The dancing platform was crowded with couples, but Isaac led her to a corner where they had a bit more space. His hand at her waist was respectful, his grip on her fingers firm but gentle as he guided her into the rhythm of the dance. "You're better at this than you claimed," Matilda observed as they moved with surprising grace. Isaac chuckled. "My mother insisted both her sons learn to dance properly, said no woman would have us otherwise. A wise woman." "She was," he agreed, a shadow of old grief crossing his features. "She would have liked you very much." The simple statement, delivered with such certainty, touched Matilda deeply. "And I would have liked to know the woman who raised such a son." They danced 3 more dances before taking a break, finding a quiet spot near the edge of the fairgrounds where lanterns cast a golden glow over the gathering dusk. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Isaac said after a comfortable silence. "Something important." Matilda's heart quickened. "Yes, the ranch house at the Flying G," he began, his voice careful, "was built with a family in mind. There are 4 bedrooms upstairs, a proper kitchen, even a room that would make a fine nursery." Matilda stilled, hardly daring to breathe as he continued. "I know it's been less than 3 months since we met," Isaac said, taking her hand in his. "And I know you're still mourning your husband in many ways, but I find myself thinking of you and Elizabeth constantly. When I'm mending fences or moving cattle, when I'm eating supper or trying to sleep, you're there in my thoughts." "Isaac," she whispered, her voice unsteady. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight," he hastened to add. "Only that you might consider in time whether you could see yourself at the Flying G, whether you might." He took a deep breath. "Whether you might consider me as a husband and a father to Elizabeth." The words hung in the air between them, weighty with promise and possibility. Matilda looked into his earnest face, this man who had held her hand in her darkest hour and promised she would never face it alone, a promise he had kept in ways neither of them could have imagined. "I don't need time," she said finally, her voice stronger now. "My heart has been making its choice these past months, even when my mind wasn't ready to acknowledge it." Hope bloomed in Isaac's eyes. "And what has it chosen?" "You," she said simply. "Us. A family." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the plains, full of light and promise. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Matilda responded with a certainty that surprised them both, her free hand coming up to rest against his cheek as the kiss deepened into something that spoke of home and belonging. When they finally parted, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Matilda Bennett. You and Elizabeth both. And we love you, she whispered back, the words feeling right and true. They were married 2 weeks later in Cottonwood Springs' small church, with Elizabeth cooing in Caleb's arms and Elena dabbing tears from her eyes. The town turned out in force for their teacher's wedding, filling the church with well wishes and the reception afterward with food and laughter. Mrs. Garland, Isaac murmured as they shared their first dance as husband and wife, has a nice ring to it. Indeed it does, Mr. Garland, Matilda replied, her heart full to bursting with joy. They moved to the Flying G the following day, Elizabeth's cradle secured in the wagon alongside Matilda's few possessions. As they approached the ranch, Matilda was surprised to see smoke rising from the chimney and activity around the house. "What's happening?" she asked, puzzled. Isaac smiled mysteriously. "A small welcome." The small welcome proved to be the ranch hands Isaac and Caleb had recently hired along with their wives, Miguel and his family, and even Elena and Frank, all gathered to welcome the new mistress of the Flying G. "We wanted to make it feel like home," Caleb explained as he helped her down from the wagon. "Isaac's been nervous as a cat about whether you'd like it here." "It's perfect," Matilda assured them both, meaning it. The house, solid and welcoming with its wide porch and ample rooms, felt right in a way her previous homes never had. That evening, after the well-wishers had departed and Elizabeth was asleep in the nursery Isaac had prepared, husband and wife stood on the porch, watching stars appear in the vast Wyoming sky. "Happy?" Isaac asked, his arm around her waist. Matilda leaned into his embrace. "More than I ever thought possible." As autumn gave way to winter, the Garland family settled into a rhythm of ranch life. Matilda continued teaching in town 3 days a week, with Isaac driving her in the buggy when weather permitted. Elizabeth thrived, growing sturdy and strong, her first tentative words bringing delight to her parents and uncle. Caleb, initially worried about being a third wheel, found his place as the adored uncle and Isaac's steadfast partner in the ranch's operations. "Never seen my brother so happy," he confided to Matilda one evening as they watched Isaac repairing a rocking horse for Elizabeth's first Christmas. "It's like he found the piece of himself that was missing." The same could be said for Matilda. The loss of her first husband had left her adrift, facing an uncertain future with a child to raise alone. But fate, in the form of a compassionate cowboy on a lonely trail, had given her a second chance at love and family. Christmas Eve found the Garlands gathered in the warm parlor, a pine tree cut from the foothills decorated with paper chains and candles. Outside, snow fell gently, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. "I have something for you," Isaac said after Elizabeth had been put to bed, retrieving a small package from behind the tree. "It's not much, but everything you give me is precious," Matilda interrupted, accepting the carefully wrapped gift. Inside, she found a locket silver, intricately engraved with tiny hinges. Opening it revealed a miniature portrait of Elizabeth on one side and on the other a lock of dark hair. "It's yours," Isaac explained, seeing her puzzled expression. "From when we first met. I found it caught on the wagon wheel after you were safely delivered to town. Kept it as a remembrance, though I never thought I'd have the courage to tell you so." Tears welled in Matilda's eyes at the sentiment behind the gesture. "Help me put it on." As Isaac fastened the locket around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin, Matilda felt a wave of gratitude for all the twists of fate that had brought them together. "I have something for you as well," she said softly, taking his hand and placing it on her abdomen. "Come summer, Elizabeth will have a brother or sister." Isaac's expression transformed from confusion to wonder in an instant. "Truly," Matilda nodded, joy bubbling up inside her at his reaction. Dr. Morgan confirmed it yesterday. With a whoop that probably woke Caleb in the next room, Isaac lifted her off her feet in a gentle embrace, spinning her around before setting her carefully back down. Another child, he marveled, his hand still resting protectively over where their baby grew. Our child. Our family, Matilda corrected, covering his hand with hers. Growing stronger every day. As the fire crackled in the hearth and snow continued to fall outside, Isaac kissed his wife with all the tenderness and passion that had grown between them. "When you cried out on that trail," he murmured against her lips, "I never imagined where answering that call would lead." "To home," Matilda replied simply. "It led us both home." In June of 1878, Matilda gave birth to a healthy son they named James after Isaac's father. Unlike Elizabeth's dramatic entry into the world, James arrived with the assistance of Dr. Morgan in the master bedroom of the Flying G, with Isaac holding Matilda's hand throughout. "Another perfect Garland," the doctor declared as he placed the swaddled infant in Matilda's arms. Isaac, his eyes suspiciously bright, leaned down to kiss his wife's forehead. "You're remarkable," he whispered. As summer ripened into fall and fall gave way to another winter, the Flying G prospered along with the Garland family. Elizabeth grew into a spirited toddler with her mother's hazel eyes and her father's determined nature, while James proved to be a calm, observant baby who rarely fussed. Matilda continued teaching, bringing the children with her to school when weather permitted. Her students adored Mrs. Garland's babies, and more than one young girl declared her intention to be just like Mrs. Garland, when she grew up, a compliment that never failed to touch Matilda deeply. On the second anniversary of their meeting that fateful day on the trail, when a pregnant woman's cry had brought a cowboy, riding to her rescue, Isaac and Matilda returned to the spot where Elizabeth had been born. They brought a picnic lunch, and both children, now joined by a third on the way, though that was still their secret. "It looks so different in daylight," Matilda observed as they spread a blanket near where the wagon had overturned. "Less threatening, somehow." Isaac nodded, watching Elizabeth toddle after a butterfly while James slept in a basket beside them. "Hard to believe so much changed in a single day." "For the better," Matilda said, leaning against his shoulder. "For the best," he corrected, drawing her closer. "I thank God every day for bringing you into my life, Matilda Garland." As the Wyoming sun warmed the summer day, Matilda reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the grief, the fear, the unexpected joy. She had cried out in fear, alone and desperate, and Isaac had answered with a promise. "You'll never face this alone." It was a promise he had kept in ways neither of them could have imagined on that starlit night. Together they had built a home, a family, a life filled with love and purpose. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked, his voice pulling her from her reverie. Matilda smiled, taking his hand and placing it over her abdomen where their third child grew strong and sure. "I'm thinking that sometimes when we're most afraid, life surprises us with exactly what we need." Isaac's answering smile held all the love and certainty that had become the foundation of their life together. "And sometimes," he added, his voice tender, "what we need is each other." As Elizabeth ran back to them, laughing with the pure joy of childhood, and James stirred sleepily in his basket, Matilda knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, just as Isaac had promised on that fateful day when their story began.